"I'm sure it's a very nice watch, sir, but the Rolexes they sell on Canal Street don't count as a valid secondary ID." The wards hung in the air of the Aetherium Airlines first-class lounge at JFK, dripping with a syrupy mix of condescension and accusation. The attendant Brenda Finch had a smile on her face, but her eyes were chips of ice. She was looking at Nathaniel Cross, a man dressed in a simple, perfectly tailored grey suit who was quietly reading on his tablet. She thought she was putting a man in his place. What she didn't know was that the man she was insulting didn't just have a ticket to fly on the plane. He held the paper that owned half the airline. This wasn't just an argument over an ID. It was the beginning of the end. The Aetherium Airlines Polaris Lounge at John F. Kennedy International Airport was a carefully curated bubble of tranquility amidst the chaos of Terminal 7. The air smelled of expensive leather, freshly brewed coffee from some obscure Guatemalan mountain, and the faint, clean scent of ozone from the air purifiers. Soft, ambient music whispered from hidden speakers, a melody designed to soothe the frayed nerves of the global elite. In a quiet corner, far from the self-serve champagne bar and the chattering clusters of business travelers, sat Nathaniel Cross. To the casual observer, he was unremarkable, and that was precisely by design. He was a tall, lean black man in his late 40s with a neatly trimmed beard just beginning to show flecks of silver at the chin. He wore no ostentatious jewelry, no logos, no bright colors. His suit was a bespoke, charcoal grey, the kind of garment whose astronomical cost was only apparent in its perfect, seamless drape. On his wrist was a Patek Philippe Calatrava, its slim profile and simple leather strap, a quiet statement of taste, not a roar of wealth. He was reading a dense financial report on a Stark Industries tablet, his focus absolute. He was flying to London for an emergency board meeting. Aetherium Airlines, a company he had a significant, if silent, interest in, was teetering on the edge of a hostile takeover by a rival conglomerate. His investment firm, Crosswind Equity, had been the airline's silent savior 5 years prior, injecting nearly $1 billion to pull it from the brink of bankruptcy in exchange for a 49% stake. He had been content to be a silent partner, a ghost in the corporate machine, so long as the dividends were steady and the management competent. But now competence was in question, and his silence was about to end. His peaceful anonymity was shattered by a clipped, unnaturally loud voice. Sir, I'm going to need to see your boarding pass again." Nathaniel looked up slowly. Standing before him was a woman in her mid-50s. Her Aetherium uniform was stretched taut across her shoulders, and her name tag read, "Brenda Finch Lounge Supervisor." She had a helmet of sprayed blonde hair and a permanent expression that suggested she'd just smelled something unpleasant. Nathaniel placed his thumb on the tablet to lock the screen, the sensitive contents vanishing. "Is there a problem?" he asked, his voice calm and low. "I just need to re-verify your credentials for the lounge," Brenda said, tapping a manicured finger on the counter of her mobile kiosk. "We've had some issues recently." The issues she was referring to were in her mind, a plague of people who didn't look the part, gaining access to her exclusive sanctuary. She saw herself not as a service employee, but as the gatekeeper of a certain standard, a standard that a man like Nathaniel Cross, in her estimation, couldn't possibly meet legitimately. Nathaniel passed her his boarding pass. She scanned it with a flourish. The machine beeped green. Access confirmed. First class. Priority 1. Seat 1A. Any reasonable person would have concluded the verification there. Brenda was not a reasonable person. "Thank you," she said, though her tone conveyed no gratitude. "And I'll need to see your identification as well, the one you checked in with." Nathaniel arched an eyebrow, but complied, pulling a slim leather wallet from his jacket and producing his New York driver's license. He was a man who understood rules and processes. He also understood when they were being weaponized. He had flown millions of miles and sat in hundreds of lounges, just like this one. He had never not once been asked for his ID after being admitted to the lounge and having his boarding pass scanned. Brenda took the license, holding it up to the light, as if it were a suspected counterfeit bill. She squinted at his photo, then at his face. She typed his name, Nathaniel Cross, into her system with 2 fingers, her lips pursed in concentration. The system, of course, confirmed everything. "All right," she said, handing the license back with a distinct reluctance. "Now for our secondary verification protocol, I'll need another form of photo ID." Nathaniel's calm began to fray at the edges, though his expression remained placid. "Secondary verification protocol, I wasn't aware Aetherium had such a policy for its Polaris members. It's a new security measure," Brenda lied smoothly. "We're implementing it for select passengers to ensure the integrity of the first-class experience." The subtext was as thick and polluted as the air outside. "Select passengers. Passengers like you." He could see the gleam of twisted victory in her eyes. She had found a way to needle him to exercise her small dominion. The other lounge guests were beginning to notice their quiet conversations faltering. A man in a Brioni suit looked over, a flicker of annoyance on his face, at the disturbance. "I'm afraid the only other photo ID I have on me is my passport," Nathaniel said, "and it's in my carry-on, which has already been stowed." Brenda's smile widened. It was a predator's smile. This was the checkmate she had engineered. "Well, that is a problem. Company policy is clear. Without a valid secondary ID, I can't let you remain in the lounge. You'll have to wait at the main gate." The humiliation was the point. To be ejected from the lounge like a common trespasser. To be paraded past the very people he was about to become the majority owner of. He could feel the stares of the other passengers, a mixture of pity, discomfort, and, for a few, quiet approval of Brenda's actions. Nathaniel took a slow, deliberate breath. He looked at his watch, the elegant Patek Philippe that Brenda had mistaken for a cheap knockoff. It was then she chose to deliver the line she had been crafting in her head, the one she would later tell her friends about with a self-satisfied chuckle. "I'm sure it's a very nice watch, sir," she said, her voice loud enough for the nearby tables to hear clearly. "But the Rolexes they sell on Canal Street don't count as a valid secondary ID." The insult, so cheap and yet so sharp, landed in the quiet room with the force of a slap. For a moment, there was only the hum of the air purifiers. Nathaniel did not get angry. He didn't raise his voice. Instead, a profound stillness settled over him. It was the stillness of a tectonic plate locking into place just before an earthquake. He had tried to be polite. He had tried to follow the rules, even the ones she was inventing on the spot. But Brenda Finch had just crossed a line. She thought she was questioning his ID. She had no idea she was actually signing the death warrant for her entire career, and quite possibly a major part of the airline she worked for. "I see," Nathaniel said, his voice now devoid of any warmth. "You believe my identification is insufficient." He leaned forward slightly. "You are absolutely certain about this course of action?" "I am the supervisor here." Brenda puffed up, "and I am absolutely certain." "Very well," Nathaniel said. He reached not for his wallet, but for the sleek black leather briefcase beside his chair. He clicked open the twin palladium latches. "You want a secondary form of identification? I believe I have something in here that will suffice." Brenda watched a smug look on her face, expecting him to produce a credit card or a university alumni card, something she could dismiss out of hand. She had no concept of the abyss she had just opened at her own feet. The document Nathaniel was about to produce wouldn't just verify his identity. It would fundamentally alter the reality of everyone in that room and everyone who worked for Aetherium Airlines. The atmosphere in the lounge had shifted. The soft murmur of conversation had died, completely replaced by a tense, expectant silence. The other passengers were no longer pretending not to watch. They were now a captivated audience to a drama they didn't fully understand, but knew was significant. Brenda Finch stood with her arms crossed, a posture of unassailable authority. She had backed her quarry into a corner, and she was savoring the moment. Nathaniel Cross operated his briefcase with the precision of a surgeon. He moved aside a folder containing architectural plans for a new pediatric wing he was funding at Mount Sinai Hospital, and another with the preliminary reports on a clean energy startup in Senegal. Finally, his fingers found what he was looking for, a simple, legal-sized manila folio held together with a plain black binder clip. It was thin, containing perhaps 10 pages. It looked utterly ordinary. He placed the folio on the small table between them. He did not open it. "Before I show you this," Nathaniel said, his eyes locking onto Brenda's, "I want to give you one final opportunity to reconsider your position. You can scan my boarding pass, which you've already done, see the green light, and return to your duties. We can forget this entire interaction happened." It was a lifeline, a golden bridge offered over the canyon she had dug. But to Brenda, it sounded like the desperate plea of a man who was bluffing. Her perception was so clouded by her prejudice that she was incapable of seeing grace. She saw only weakness. "The time for that is over, sir," she snapped. "You've caused a scene. Now either you provide the required identification, or I'm calling airport security to have you removed." She gestured vaguely towards her earpiece, a theatrical threat. "I won't be needing airport security." A new voice cut in. A man in a slightly ill-fitting but expensive-looking suit strode towards them. His name tag read, "Gregory Shaw, Manager of Premium Services." He was in his late 30s with a weak chin and the overconfident swagger of a man who had been promoted one level beyond his competence. Brenda had called him her version of calling for backup. "Brenda, what's the issue here?" Gregory asked, though he directed the question to her pointedly ignoring Nathaniel. "This gentleman," Brenda said, loading the word with contempt, "is refusing to comply with our secondary verification protocol. He's been unable to produce a second piece of photo ID and is now being disruptive." Gregory Shaw looked Nathaniel up and down, his gaze lingering for a moment on the custom suit, then dismissing it. He saw what Brenda saw, a problem, an anomaly that didn't fit his carefully constructed image of a first-class passenger. Shaw's management style was simple: back his staff, especially when they were enforcing the unwritten rules that kept the lounge exclusive. So Gregory began, his voice a condescending balm. "I'm sure we can sort this out, but my supervisor is simply doing her job. The policies are in place for the comfort and safety of all our guests. If you can't provide the ID, we really must insist that you wait for your flight at the gate." Nathaniel slowly shook his head, a small, sad smile touching his lips. "You both keep mentioning a policy that doesn't exist. I would know." Gregory chuckled, a short, barking sound. "Oh, you would you? Are you on the Corporate Policy Committee?" In a manner of speaking, Nathaniel replied, his voice still unnervingly calm. He tapped the manila folio. "This should clarify my position." He unclipped the binder and slid the top document out. It was not a passport. It was not a driver's license. It was a single sheet of heavy cream-colored bond paper, bearing the letterhead of the most powerful corporate law firm in New York, Cravath, Swain & Moore, LLP. He didn't hand it to Brenda. He bypassed her completely, holding it out for Gregory Shaw. I believe you'll find this in order, Mr. Shaw." Gregory took the paper, a flicker of annoyance on his face. He expected to see some kind of legal-looking, but ultimately meaningless letter from a personal lawyer. He began to read. His smug expression held for the first 2 lines. Then his eyes widened slightly. He blinked, rereading the first paragraph. A small bead of sweat trickled down from his hairline, tracing a path past his temple. The color began to drain from his face, leaving behind a pasty grayish pallor. Brenda, seeing her manager's reaction, started to feel the first cold tendril of fear. "What is it, Greg?" she asked, her voice losing its sharp edge. Gregory didn't answer. His hand, the one holding the paper, had begun to tremble. He was reading the 3rd paragraph now, the one that detailed the agenda for the emergency Aetherium Airlines Board of Directors, meeting scheduled for 9:00 a.m. GMT the following day. The first item on the agenda was discussion and vote on the tender offer proposed by Crosswind Equity to acquire a controlling 51% stake in Aetherium Airlines, Inc. The second item was confirmation of the appointment of Mr. Nathaniel Cross, Principal and CEO of Crosswind Equity, to the position of Chairman of the Board, effective immediately upon successful completion of the tender offer. Gregory's mouth opened and closed silently, like a fish gasping for air. His brain was struggling to process the information, to reconcile the man sitting calmly in the corner, with the name on the legal document in his shaking hand. The name that, for all intents and purposes, was about to become his ultimate boss. The name of the man whose firm already owned 49% of the entire company. He looked up from the paper, his eyes wide with sheer, unadulterated terror. He looked at Nathaniel Cross, but he was no longer seeing a man in a nice suit. He was seeing the ghost at the feast, the silent power that had just decided to make himself known in the most dramatic way possible. Mr. Cross." Gregory stammered, the paper rattling in his hand. I don't... There must be some... Brenda was now staring at Gregory, her own face, a mask of confusion and dawning horror. "Greg, what is wrong? What does it say?" Nathaniel answered for him, his voice cutting through the silence. He looked directly at Brenda, his gaze so intense it felt like a physical weight. "What it says, Ms. Finch," he stated, "is that the policy you were so determined to enforce does not apply to me. Because as of tomorrow morning, I won't just be a passenger on this airline." He leaned forward, letting the words land with surgical precision. "I will own it." The silence that followed Nathaniel's declaration was absolute. It was a dense, heavy silence, broken only by the faint, almost mocking whisper of the ambient music. Gregory Shaw stood frozen, the legal document shaking in his hand like a leaf in a hurricane. Brenda Finch's face had collapsed into a rictus of disbelief and panic. The smug gatekeeper had vanished, replaced by a woman staring into the abyss. Own it, Brenda whispered, the words catching in her throat. It was a concept so far beyond her reality that her mind refused to accept it. She looked from the terrifyingly calm face of Nathaniel Cross to the ashen, sweat-slicked face of her manager. Gregory, finally finding a sliver of his voice, tried to salvage the unsalvageable. "Mr. Cross, sir, this is a misunderstanding. A terrible, terrible misunderstanding." He fumbled to hand the document back, as if it were radioactive. "Brenda, she's new. She told me she was the supervisor," Nathaniel interrupted, his voice cold and precise. "And you told me she was just doing her job. Which is it, Mr. Shaw? Is she an incompetent new hire, or is she an experienced supervisor, diligently enforcing your phantom policies?" Gregory's jaw worked, but no sound came out. He was trapped. Every possible excuse was a path to a different kind of damnation. Nathaniel turned his attention back to Brenda, who seemed to be shrinking into her uniform. "You questioned my identity, Miss Finch. You insinuated I was a thief wearing a counterfeit watch. You attempted to publicly humiliate me based on nothing more than your own narrow-minded assumptions." He paused, letting the indictment hang in the air. "Let me be perfectly clear. My name is Nathaniel Cross. I am the founder and CEO of Crosswind Equity, the private investment firm that holds a 49% stake in this airline, the stake that pulled Aetherium out of Chapter 11 bankruptcy 5 years ago." He gestured to the folio still on the table. "This document is a legally binding notice for an emergency board meeting, a meeting I called. The purpose of that meeting is to execute a contractual clause that allows my firm to purchase an additional 2% of common stock, giving us a majority controlling interest. This action is being taken in response to the board's gross mismanagement regarding the hostile takeover bid from Airline Consolidated. As of approximately 10 o'clock tomorrow morning, I will be the chairman of the board of Aetherium Airlines." Each word was a hammer blow, dismantling Brenda's world piece by piece. The other passengers were now openly staring, their phones discreetly pointed in their direction. The scene had morphed from an uncomfortable confrontation into a corporate execution. A young man sitting nearby, an analyst for a hedge fund, had recognized the name Crosswind Equity and was now frantically typing into his phone, his eyes wide with the realization of who he was witnessing. "Now, Mr. Shaw." Nathaniel continued, turning his laser-like focus onto the trembling manager. "You endorsed your supervisor's behavior. You condescended to me. You threatened me with security. You are the manager of premium services. Tell me, is this the premium service Aetherium is proud to offer its clientele? Is this the behavior you cultivate in your staff?" "No, sir. No, absolutely not." Gregory sputtered, his voice cracking. "I am so sorry. I am profoundly sorry." Brenda apologized to Mr. Cross. "Apologize right now." He shoved Brenda forward. She stumbled, catching herself on the edge of the table. She looked at Nathaniel, her eyes swimming with tears of pure, selfish terror. The apology that came out was a choked, pathetic whimper. I'm sorry, sir." Nathaniel regarded her with an unnervingly neutral expression. There was no anger, no satisfaction, just a deep, weary disappointment. "Your apology is not for me, Miss Finch. You should be apologizing to the very idea of service. You should be apologizing to every person you've ever judged on sight. But most of all, you should be apologizing to yourself for allowing your prejudice to cost you everything." He then reached into his briefcase again. This time, he pulled out his personal cell phone. He scrolled through his contacts, bypassing the CEO and the COO. He was going straight to the top of the chain of command that mattered in that moment. He found the name he was looking for, Robert Maxwell, CEO. He pressed the call button. It rang once. "Nathaniel," a harried voice answered immediately. "I was just about to call you. Did you see the latest filing from Airline? Their lawyers are animals." "Robert." Nathaniel said, his voice calm and level, cutting through the CEO's panic. "Forget Airline for a moment. We have a more pressing internal problem, a brand integrity problem. I need you to listen very carefully." Gregory Shaw and Brenda Finch watched horrified as Nathaniel Cross, the man they had tried to eject from a first-class lounge, began to calmly and methodically recount the entire incident to the chief executive officer of the airline. He left nothing out: the demand for ID, the non-existent secondary verification protocol, the lie about him being disruptive, and the final damning insult about his watch. As Nathaniel spoke, Gregory could feel his career, his mortgage, his entire professional life, dissolving into smoke. Brenda was openly crying now, quiet, racking sobs of a person who has just realized they have made a fatal, irreversible mistake. So Robert, Nathaniel, concluded into the phone, his gaze still fixed on the two disgraced employees. I am sitting in your flagship Polaris lounge at JFK, and I have to say, the premium experience leaves something to be desired. I'm going to need you to handle this. Not tomorrow. Not in an hour. I want you to handle it right now. I'll wait. He ended the call and placed the phone face down on the table. The finality of the gesture was absolute. He looked at Gregory and Brenda, who were standing under the weight of his stare like prisoners awaiting their sentence. He'll be sending someone, Nathaniel said quietly. I suggest you wait here. The 10 minutes that followed Nathaniel's phone call were the longest of Gregory Shaw's and Brenda Finch's lives. The Polaris lounge, once a sanctuary, had become a courtroom. The other passengers were the jury, the verdict already delivered. No one spoke. The only sounds were Brenda's muffled sobs and the frantic, silent tapping of the hedge fund analyst on his phone, likely sending out an alert that would make Crosswind Equity's impending move the talk of Wall Street by morning. Nathaniel Cross simply returned to his seat, picked up his tablet, and resumed reading his financial report as if nothing had happened. His composure was in itself a form of punishment. He was so far above them, so utterly unshaken by the confrontation, that it underscored the sheer magnitude of their blunder. They hadn't just insulted a customer, they had annoyed a god of their corporate universe, and he had swatted them aside with a single phone call. The arrival was not loud or dramatic. There were no flashing lights or shouting security guards. Instead, two figures entered the lounge with quiet purpose. They were not airport police. They were dressed in dark, impeccably tailored suits, the kind worn by men who handle problems, not write tickets. They were Aetherium's corporate security, the elite team that reported directly to the executive floor. Leading them was a tall, severe-looking man named Arthur Vance, the airline's vice president of global security. Vance was a legend in the company, a man who had handled everything from hijacking threats to corporate espionage. His presence at a lounge dispute was unheard of. It was like sending a Navy SEAL team to deal with a shoplifter. Vance's eyes swept the room and immediately found Nathaniel Cross. He walked directly to him, completely ignoring Gregory and Brenda. Mr. Cross, Vance said, his voice a low rumble. Arthur Vance, Global Security. Mr. Maxwell sent me. He extends his deepest, most profound apologies for this incident. Are you all right? I'm fine, Arthur, Nathaniel said, not looking up from his tablet. The issue is with the staff. Vance gave a curt nod. Only then did he turn his attention to the two trembling employees. His face was a granite mask of controlled fury. He knew exactly what this incident meant. Not just a PR nightmare, but a direct insult to the man who was, for all intents and purposes, the new king. Shaw. Finch. Vance's voice was ice. With me, now. Gregory started to speak, to offer some pathetic last-ditch defense. Arthur, I can explain. You will explain nothing to me. Gregory. Vance cut him off, his voice dangerously low. You will surrender your airport and company credentials to my associate. You will then be escorted from the terminal. Your employment with Aetherium Airlines is terminated effective immediately. A corporate courier will deliver the relevant paperwork to your homes tomorrow. Do you understand? Termination. Not suspension. Not a review. It was an execution, swift and final. Brenda let out a small, strangled cry. My pension. I've been here for 27 years. Vance's gaze fell upon her. And if she had felt fear before, it was nothing compared to the cold dread that now flooded her veins. You should have considered your 27 years of service before you decided to engage in what Mr. Maxwell described to me on the phone as career suicide by way of bigotry. Your pension will be handled by HR in accordance with the termination for cause clause in your employment contract. Now give my man your ID. The second security officer, a large, silent man, stepped forward, his hand outstretched. Numbly like automatons, Gregory and Brenda unclipped their ID badges and handed them over. The plastic cards that had been their symbols of power and authority were now just inert objects, evidence of a life that had ended minutes ago. "Let's go," Vance ordered. As they were being led out, Gregory Shaw, in a final, desperate act, turned back toward Nathaniel. "Mr. Cross, please, I have a family. A mortgage." Nathaniel finally looked up from his tablet. He regarded Gregory for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "So do I, Mr. Shaw," he said quietly. "And I would prefer to travel to see them without being harassed by the staff of a company I happen to own. Your personal circumstances are a consequence of your professional choices. Goodbye." With that, he went back to his reading. The exchange was over. Gregory's face crumpled in defeat. He and a weeping Brenda were escorted out of the lounge past the staring eyes of the passengers. They were paraded through the very temple they had lorded over, now stripped of their authority and their dignity. The doors to the lounge hissed shut behind them, sealing their fate. The lounge slowly returned to a semblance of normalcy, though the tension lingered. A few minutes later, a young, impeccably dressed woman from the corporate office arrived breathless. She introduced herself as the personal aide to the CEO. "Mr. Cross," she said, her voice filled with reverence and fear. "Mr. Maxwell has arranged for the private Aetherium jet, the Geoscalfe, reserved for the board, to be ready for you in 20 minutes. It can take you to London directly and far more comfortably. Your luggage is being transferred now. We have a private car waiting downstairs to take you to the executive hangar." Nathaniel considered it for a moment. Taking the private jet would be a symbol of his new overt power. But that wasn't his style. "Thank you," he said, offering her a polite smile. "But that won't be necessary. I'm quite comfortable here. I'll take my scheduled flight. Please just inform the captain of Flight 110 that I'll be his guest in Seat 1A. He wanted to fly with the other passengers. He wanted to see the flight attendants, the pilots, the gate agents who did their jobs professionally and without prejudice. His fight wasn't with them. His fight was with a toxic culture that people like Brenda Finch and Gregory Shaw had been allowed to foster, and that was a fight he was just beginning. As he boarded the plane a short while later, the gate agent scanned his pass and gave him a warm, genuine smile. "Welcome aboard, Mr. Cross. We hope you have a pleasant flight." It was a simple professional courtesy, and in that moment, it meant more to him than any private jet ever could. The next morning, the fallout from the JFK incident hit the 50-story Aetherium Tower in downtown Chicago like a seismic shockwave. The video filmed by the hedge fund analyst and discreetly sent to a contact at Bloomberg had not yet gone public. But within the rarefied air of high finance and corporate governance, it was the only thing anyone was talking about. It was a digital ghost passed from phone to phone, from terminal to terminal, a precursor to the public storm that was about to break. Robert Maxwell, the CEO of Aetherium, had not slept. His corner office, with its panoramic view of Lake Michigan, felt more like a prison cell. He had spent the night in a series of frantic, panicked calls with the board, his legal team, and the company's PR firm. The consensus was grim. "It's a cataclysm," Robert, his chief counsel, a man named David Chen, had said bluntly over a 3 a.m. conference call. "Cross is using this. The incident is the moral justification for the takeover. The clause in his original investment agreement is ironclad. He can call for the stock purchase with 24 hours' notice if he can demonstrate gross mismanagement endangering the brand. And he's got a video of our JFK Premium Services manager and a supervisor engaging in what looks like racial profiling against him. He doesn't just have a smoking gun, he has a nuclear arsenal. Maxwell slammed his fist on his mahogany desk. How could Shaw be so stupid? And that woman, Finch, 27 years with the company. Stupidity is not a legal defense, Chen had replied dryly. Nathaniel Cross has been a silent partner for 5 years. He's the invisible man who saved all our jobs. We always knew he was brilliant, but we thought he was passive. We were wrong. He's been watching, waiting. The Airlink takeover attempt was the business reason to act, but the JFK incident, that made it personal. He's going to clean house, Robert, and he's starting at the top. The board meeting was scheduled for 9 a.m. London time, which was 3 a.m. in Chicago. Maxwell and his team were gathered in the main boardroom, connected via a secure video link. On the massive screen, the faces of the other board members popped up one by one, all of them looking grim and sleepless. The last window to activate was Nathaniel Cross. He was not in a fancy hotel room. He was in a simple, sparse office space in Canary Wharf, a cup of coffee in his hand. He looked rested, calm, and completely in control. "Good morning, ladies and gentlemen," Nathaniel began, his voice even. "As per the notice circulated yesterday, this is an emergency meeting of the board. I assume everyone has read the proposal from Crosswind Equity." A flurry of muted yeses came from the board members. "The situation is simple," Nathaniel continued, leaning forward. "Aetherium is vulnerable. The offer from Airlink is predatory, and this board's response has been slow and indecisive. Crosswind Equity's original investment was predicated on competent leadership that would protect the brand and its assets. That leadership has faltered." He paused, letting the accusation settle. "And then there is the matter of the brand itself." On the screen, the video from the JFK lounge began to play. It was shaky, but the audio was crystal clear. The board watched in horrified silence as Brenda Finch delivered her line about the Canal Street Rolex. They watched Gregory Shaw's smarmy condescension. They watched as Nathaniel calmly revealed his identity, and the color drained from their employees' faces. When the video ended, there was a stunned silence. "This," Nathaniel said, his voice now hard as steel, "is a symptom of a deep and pervasive cultural rot. A culture that you, the board, and you, Robert, as CEO, have allowed to fester. You have focused on stock prices and profit margins, while the soul of the company has decayed. A brand is a promise. Our brand promises premium service, respect, and dignity. Yesterday in our flagship lounge, our own staff broke that promise in the most egregious way possible." He looked directly at the camera, making eye contact with every person in the Chicago boardroom. "Crosswind Equity is therefore exercising its option. We will be purchasing the 2% stake, as outlined, bringing our total ownership to 51%. The wire transfer for the shares at yesterday's closing price will be completed within the hour. Following that, as the new majority shareholder, I am calling for a vote. The first motion is to formally reject the Airlink takeover bid. The second motion is to accept Robert Maxwell's resignation as Chief Executive Officer, effective immediately." Maxwell's face went white. "Nathaniel, you can't. We've worked together for 5 years. And in those 5 years, Robert, this is what our airline has become." Nathaniel replied, his voice unyielding. "This is not personal. It is a necessary business decision to restore faith in the Aetherium brand. The rot stops today. We will rebuild the culture of this company from the ground up. The vote, please." One by one, the board members, seeing the undeniable power shift, voted in favor. They were saving their own skins. Within 5 minutes it was done. Robert Maxwell, the powerful CEO, was out. Nathaniel Cross, the quiet man from the lounge, was in total control. His first act as chairman was to promote the COO, a sharp and capable woman named Sarah Jennings, to interim CEO. His second act was to address the entire board. My first directive to Ms. Jennings will be to launch a company-wide audit of all HR complaints, discrimination claims, and customer service incidents from the past 5 years. We are going to find every Brenda Finch and Gregory Shaw in this company. We are going to root out the toxicity they represent. And we are going to build an airline that is not just profitable, but one that is worthy of the trust our passengers and our good employees place in us every single day. The work starts now. In the Chicago Tower, the tremors had just begun. A new era for Aetherium Airlines had dawned, born in the quiet fury of a man who had been pushed too far. For Brenda Finch, the world ended not with a bang, but with the quiet click of a deactivated keycard. After being escorted out of JFK by corporate security, she and Gregory Shaw had been put in separate cabs and sent home, their heads spinning with a dizzying cocktail of shock, shame, and terror. Brenda spent the night sitting in her small, meticulously clean apartment in Queens, staring at the wall. The apartment was her pride and joy, a cramped one-bedroom she kept as immaculate as she tried to keep her lounge. It was filled with mementos from her 27 years of service, a framed photo of her shaking hands with a previous CEO, a small collection of Aetherium model planes, a service pin for 25 years. They had been badges of honor. Now they felt like relics from a dead civilization. Her bitterness had been a slow-growing cancer. She had been passed over for promotion 3 times in the last decade, each time for someone younger, someone with a college degree, someone who didn't have her experience. She saw the world changing around her, becoming a place she didn't recognize and didn't like. The first-class lounge was the one place where the old rules still seemed to apply where she held power. Her petty tyranny was the only defense she had against her own looming obsolescence. And in one spectacular hubristic moment, she had used that power against the one man on Earth she could not afford to offend. The next day the courier arrived. Inside the Aetherium-branded envelope was a thick packet of documents. The termination letter was brutal in its corporate efficiency. Termination for cause. It stated, due to gross misconduct, willful disregard for company policy, and actions resulting in significant brand and reputational damage. The for cause part was the dagger. It meant no severance package. Her accumulated sick days and vacation time would be paid out, but her pension, which she was only 3 years from collecting, was now in jeopardy. The contract clause they cited was clear termination for gross misconduct, could result in the forfeiture of certain unvested portions of her retirement benefits. The company she had given her entire adult life to was now casting her out with nothing. The unraveling was swift. The first call was from the airline's credit union, informing her that the outstanding balance on her high-interest personal loan was now due in full, as her employment, the primary condition of the loan, had been terminated. That was $15,000 she didn't have. She had taken the loan to help her sister, who was battling mounting medical bills from a chronic illness. Her phone buzzed with texts from former colleagues. Some were laced with schadenfreude, others with pity. The story was everywhere now. A junior lounge attendant, a young man she had written up 2 months ago for having an untucked shirt, sent her a simple text. Karma's a bitch, isn't it? But the hardest karma, the truest and most poetic justice, was yet to come. It arrived in the form of a final mandatory appointment at the Aetherium HR Processing Center near the airport. She had to go in person to sign the final papers and handle the Cobra insurance conversion. She walked into the sterile office, her face pale and drawn. The HR coordinator who called her name was a young black woman in her late 20s, poised and professional. Her name was Alicia Roberts. Brenda's blood ran cold. She remembered Alicia. A year ago, Alicia had been working in a junior administrative role. Brenda had filed a formal complaint against her. Alicia had parked in a spot Brenda considered hers in the employee lot, even though the spots were unassigned. Brenda had claimed Alicia was disrespectful and insubordinate when asked to move. It was a complete fabrication, a simple power play. Alicia had been formally reprimanded, a black mark placed on her record, because it was Brenda's word, the word of a 26-year veteran, against a new hire. Alicia Roberts gave no sign of recognition. She was a model of detached professionalism. "Ms. Finch, please have a seat. I have your final separation documents here." She walked Brenda through the paperwork, her voice calm and even. She explained the implications of the for-cause termination, the details of the pension review process, the exorbitant cost of Cobra health insurance. Each sentence, delivered with perfect corporate neutrality, was another nail in the coffin of Brenda's life. As Brenda sat there, stripped of her pride, and her future forced to take instruction from the very woman she had once tried to ruin over a parking spot, the full weight of her actions crashed down on her. It wasn't just about Nathaniel Cross. It was about a lifetime of small cruelties, of petty abuses of power. Alicia Roberts, sitting there in her new, more senior position, a promotion she had earned as part of the new management's company-wide talent review, was the living embodiment of the world Brenda had fought against, and lost to. When all the papers were signed, Alicia stood up. "That concludes our meeting, Ms. Finch. We have a box for your personal effects from your locker. Security will escort you." As Brenda turned to leave a broken woman, Alicia spoke one last time, her voice no longer that of an HR coordinator, but just a person. "For the record, Brenda," she said quietly, "it was a terrible thing you did. Not just to Mr. Cross, but to everyone who believed in what this company was supposed to stand for. I hope you understand that now." Brenda couldn't answer. She could only nod, tears streaming down her face, and allow herself to be led away a ghost in the halls of the company she had once called home. The karma wasn't loud or violent. It was quiet, professional, and devastatingly complete. 6 months later, the name Aetherium Airlines was rarely mentioned without the name Nathaniel Cross. The story of the JFK Lounge incident had become a business school legend, a cautionary tale about corporate culture and the perils of prejudice. The video had eventually leaked, creating a firestorm of media attention that paradoxically ended up benefiting the airline. Nathaniel Cross had not just taken over a company, he had launched a revolution. Under the leadership of the new CEO, Sarah Jennings, and with the full backing of their new chairman, Aetherium, underwent a radical transformation. The internal audit Nathaniel had ordered unearthed dozens of cases, like Alicia Roberts's good employees who had been stifled or pushed out by a toxic middle management culture. The Gregory Shaws and Brenda Finches of the company were systematically removed. It wasn't a purge based on rumor, but on data performance reviews, employee complaints, and patterns of discriminatory actions that had been ignored for years. In their place, people like Alicia Roberts were promoted. Having impressed the new leadership with her poise and sharp intellect, Alicia was named the director of the newly created Office of Employee Advocacy, a department with real power to investigate and resolve internal complaints reporting directly to the CEO's office. Nathaniel's vision was not about punishment. It was about rebuilding. He poured millions into new training programs, not the usual corporate speak slideshows, but intensive scenario-based workshops focused on empathy de-escalation and unconscious bias. He tied executive bonuses directly to improvements in employee satisfaction and customer service scores. The Polaris Lounge at JFK was completely redesigned. The new space was more open, more welcoming. The new staff was a vibrant mix of people from all backgrounds, all trained under the new Aetherium Promise Charter, a document penned by Nathaniel himself. Its first line was simple: "Dignity is not a premium service, it is the standard." The airline, once seen as stuffy and complacent, became a symbol of modern responsive corporate leadership. Talented people from across the industry clamored to work there. Passenger numbers soared. The stock price, after an initial dip, climbed to historic highs, far surpassing what it had been before the incident. The hostile takeover bid from Airlink Consolidated became a forgotten footnote. One crisp autumn afternoon, Nathaniel Cross was flying from New York to Chicago for a quarterly review. He was as always flying commercial in seat 1A. As he settled in, the lead flight attendant, a warm, professional woman named Maria, came to greet him. "Welcome aboard, Mr. Cross," she said with a genuine smile. "It's an honor to have you with us today. Can I get you something to drink before we take off?" "Just some water would be great, Maria." "Thank you," he replied. As she turned to leave, a young attendant who was shadowing her looked at Nathaniel with wide, curious eyes. Later, when they were in the galley, the young attendant whispered to Maria, "Is that really him? The one the story is about?" Maria nodded, her expression serious but proud. "That's him. He's the man who reminded all of us what our jobs are really about. It's not about serving drinks. It's about serving people." Nathaniel, overhearing the exchange, allowed himself a small, private smile. He looked out the window as the plane pushed back from the gate, the powerful engines beginning to whine. He hadn't set out to become an airline mogul or a corporate crusader. He was a financier, a man of numbers and contracts. But on that fateful day in the JFK lounge, Brenda Finch had forced him to become something more. She had insulted a black man, not knowing he was her boss. In doing so, she had inadvertently handed him the power to redefine the very meaning of the word. He wasn't just the owner anymore, he was the standard. And as the plane climbed into the sky, soaring towards a new horizon, he knew the work was far from over, but it had been a damn good start. And there you have it. The story of Nathaniel Cross isn't just about the epic karma that befell one racist airline attendant. It's a powerful reminder that true power isn't about the title on your name tag or the authority you think you have. It's about character, dignity, and the quiet strength to stand up to injustice, whether it's in a first-class lounge or in your own daily life. People like Brenda Finch and Gregory Shaw exist everywhere, hiding behind rules and wielding their tiny slivers of power to diminish others. But so do people like Nathaniel Cross and Alicia Roberts, who prove that integrity and excellence are the ultimate response. What did you think of the hard karma Brenda received? Was it too much, or was it exactly what she deserved? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and make sure you subscribe for more true-life drama and tales of justice served. Thank you for watching.